Welcome to Friends at the End podcast with Sorcha Hume. A program dedicated to end-of-life choices, dignity in dying and personal autonomy, as well as a debate on assisted dying legislation, among other themes. The Friends at the End podcast aims to bring in a variety of voices, from testimonials to parliamentarians, lawmakers, philosophers, and health professionals. Today we welcome Liam McArthur and Amanda Ward. Liam is a Scottish politician serving as Deputy Presiding Officer of the Scottish Parliament. A member of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, he's been an MSP for Orkney since 2007. Liam is a long-standing campaigner for assisted death legislation. Amanda is the former CEO of Friends at the End, a position she held for nearly a decade. She holds a Master's in Assisted Dying from Glasgow University and has studied for a PhD on the subject. Amanda is an advisor to Liam. Welcome both to episode 1 of the Friends at the End podcast.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sorcha Hume and I'm the Chief Executive of Friends at the End, and this is episode 1 of the Friends at the End podcast. Friends at the End is a charitable organisation that promotes understanding of the choices people have at the end of their lives and campaigns to introduce legislation that will permit assisted dying as an option for terminally ill adults. Today I have with me 2 very special guests. Amanda Ward, previous CEO of Friends at the End, and MSP Liam McArthur. Welcome to the podcast. So first of all, I have a question for both of you. So the BMA just yesterday has changed its stance on assisted dying from opposition to neutrality. What was your first reaction to this, and what does this mean for future legislation that would introduce assisted dying for terminally ill adults? Liam, do you want to start?
Yeah, very, very happy to do so, Sorcha, and thanks for the invitation to join the podcast. Well, I think, like many, it was a mixture of relief and elation to some extent. I think there's a lot of work being done with those within the medical community over recent years, talking through the issues around potential changes in the law around assisted dying. I think we've seen a range of views across the medical profession, which in a sense mirrors the range of views you find in the population at large. But I think the fact that they've arrived at a decision to take a neutral stance on this issue, I think is very welcome, but I think it's entirely appropriate as well, given those the range of those views. And I think it puts the BMA in an ideal position now to engage in the process of considering the proposals that I'll bring forward for consultation shortly, and helping shape any future legislation so that what we have is are laws that are fit for purpose, and that are in the best interests of patients, but also in the interests of medical practitioners as well.
Thanks, Liam. Amanda, do you have anything to add to that?
Just to say that, again, it was a relief, and I suppose my first reaction was that it's about time. Mm-hmm. Having worked in this for a long time, initially with Margot and then with Patrick and now with Liam, we've attempted on multiple occasions to bring the BMA into these conversations, and to some extent that's been met with a barrier because they do have an opposed stance. So I was heartened yesterday to hear the Deputy Chair of the BMA saying himself that this now means that they can engage with the process and be part of the conversation. And it doesn't mean that they're supporting assisted dying. It just means that they've moved to a position of neutral, and that allows us to have a much more productive relationship with them as we move forward.
Thanks both for that. I just want to go back a wee bit to and go back to you, Amanda. So for a number of years, you were the chief executive at Friends at the End. Can you tell us a bit how you came to be in that role and what drove you to campaign for assisted dying in the first place?
So certainly not a career path that I had planned. I don't know many folk that are in a position that they planned right out, but I was a master's student in the law school at Glasgow University. And Friends at the End and Margot came to my professor and said, give us your best student to work on this. And of course, the best students were all off that day, so I got put forward. So yeah, it was in a very academic way that I was involved with this initially, from having done my master's, and I had studied it at honours level as well, so I had a sort of general awareness. So yeah, initially working with Margot and then with Friends at the End, and then I suppose just sort of working my way up and went on to do the PhD and continued to work with the MSPs and other charities and stakeholders in this. So I think I've been really lucky in that sense, and that I've had a very sort of theoretical ivory tower understanding of this debate, but I've also seen, I suppose, the law in action from working with Friends at the End and working with their members and, you know, ordinary citizens who have come forward and shared their stories with us. So yeah, that's initially from a very academic position, and then was just thoroughly convinced by the arguments and by the experiences that I had. So yeah, I'm here for a while longer anyway.
Thanks, Amanda. It can be quite harrowing, can't it, hearing those personal stories. Liam, I want to come back to you for a moment. And as many people will know, you're planning to lodge a bill in the Scottish Parliament looking to legalise assisted dying. We know that previous efforts to introduce assisted dying have been voted down in Holyrood in 2010 and 2015. How has the context changed since then?
Well, I think, Amanda's described her own personal journey in this, and I think I can well understand the frustration and exasperation that those like Amanda feel, that we've been, a number of us have been making the argument for a change in the law over many years, and have really failed to move the dial in political terms over that period. I think there was a decision taken during the course of the last Parliament that simply bringing forward another bill wasn't the right approach, that there was more work to be done looking at international experience and working with a number of the main stakeholders, including those in the medical profession, building the argument, and I think recognising that there is a lag effect in terms of the political discourse around this, behind where the public is and has been for many years. So since the last bill was unsuccessfully brought forward in the Scottish Parliament, there's been quite a significant change in the membership of the Parliament. The number of new MSPs that have been both in this session but also in the previous session, who haven't had an opportunity to engage in a political or a legislative sense with this issue is significant. And therefore, I think it's going to be a difficult process, and rightly so. Making laws should be challenging. It should be difficult. Arguments should be tested to destruction sometimes. But I think the mood has changed within the Parliament. I think it has, in a sense, caught up with where the public is to a much greater extent. And therefore, there's a lot of work ahead. But I think I'm confident that the ingredients are there to allow us to bring forward proposals that will command the support of a majority of members, as well as the confidence of the public, that these laws can be introduced safely and in a way that provides those who are dying with a compassionate, dignified way of taking control of that process.
Yeah, thanks for that, Liam. I wonder if this question is for both of you. Can you share some of the key statistics people should be aware of when it comes to assisted dying, kind of particularly looking at public opinion and the international context?
Yeah, so I'll maybe start on that one. So neither of us are statisticians, but we do know, and you'll see this when the consultation is launched as well, that across the board between political party affiliation and the general public, people who subscribe to particular faith groups, socio-economic status, right across the board, we're looking at over 80% support for assisted dying. And that's certainly something that's increased since the last attempt in 2015. We were sitting at sort of 70%. So, I'm not someone who wholeheartedly buys in to polling, but it is very useful to gauge opinions and to gauge the sort of atmosphere around this. So that's the most recent statistics that we've included in this consultation, is that across the board we're looking at over 80% support for this proposal. And maybe just add to what Liam said as well around, what's changed and why the sort of public and parliamentarians don't match up on this. I suppose that we need to have some sympathy for the parliamentarians because they've got a lot more to lose. It's all right for general citizens to answer a poll saying they support this, but parliamentarians have a huge amount of responsibility when they're passing laws. I think that, there is an awful lot more resource there as well. When Margot did this in 2010 and initially in 2013, it was Margot and her brilliant office manager, Peter Warren, who were, sitting doing this really quite single-handedly, and they had support from other MSPs. But this time there's a huge campaign and there's much more resource to support this process, because it does take an awful lot of work to get us there.
Yeah.
I think, all I would add to that is, as Amanda says, I think there's been consistent but growing public support for a change. I share her slight unease about using polling statistics, and there have been examples of where those have been caught out by the facts in due course. But I see this just in terms of the correspondence I received through the mailbag. Yes, you still hear from people who have strong misgivings and strong opposition to a change in the law, but many, many more who are coming forward and expressing their support for a change. And I think some of that is borne out by more and more people having lived experience of a family member, a friend, a family member of a close friend going through a bad and needlessly painful and traumatic death. And therefore, while it would be wrong to read too much into the polling, I think there is a general belief that whatever change in the law is needed, a change is absolutely needed. And therefore, it now falls, I think, to us as parliamentarians to find a way of changing the law that commands broad support and commands public confidence. And for many, it may not go far enough. I dare say there'll be criticisms from those who wanted to go further, as well as criticisms for those who do not want to budge from the status quo. But I think we're at a point now where there's a meeting of minds between the debate within the Parliament and the wider public perception that the status quo is untenable, it's unsustainable. This is a reform that's long overdue. But we now need to take time to make sure that whatever changes we introduce do command that confidence.
I think as well, I'm sort of thinking in terms of this debate as it has happened across the UK. And we are still a relatively new parliament when you consider, for instance, our counterparts in England and Wales and Westminster. So I think that over the last 10 years from 11 years since Margot's first attempt as well, Scottish Parliament has really sort of come into its own and started to shape the sort of parliament that it wants to be for the people of Scotland. And we know that that's a compassionate parliament. It's a parliament who listens to the people that it represents. And I think that all matches up with the sort of underpinnings of this debate around compassion and autonomy and choice and citizen participation as well. So I think that this journey that the Parliament itself has been on as well, and sort of finding its feet and finding the underpinning values that it represents is well matched with the issues in this debate.
Thank you both for that. Amanda, I want to come back to you for a moment. With the bill being introduced, a lot of our listeners maybe won't understand how the process works, from the introduction of the bill to its eventual hopeful approval and implementation. Can you maybe share just some detail about how that process works?
Sure. I think that's a really important question. So the stage that we're at just now is we are drafting a consultation, and that consultation will go out to the public. We then have a 12-week consultation period where anyone can contribute, whether they're an organisation, an individual. And we want to hear as many views as possible reflected in those responses. We'll then spend time analysing the consultation, and we will work with the non-government bills unit here in the Parliament on those on that analysis. We'll then be given a bill drafter, and we'll work very closely with the bill drafters to feed in the responses from the consultation, and working very closely, of course, with Liam and NGBU to build the most robust bill that is reflective of that consultation. So once we have the bill drafted, which can take a number of months, we would then go to committee stage. So the bill would be put into, say, for instance, the Health Committee, and they would scrutinise it, and maybe another secondary committee like the Justice Committee, for example. They would scrutinise it. They would bring in people for evidence sessions as well. So that might be academics, organisations, the likes of the BME and others. They would then produce a report, a summary report of their views on the bill. So again, that process can take a number of months, and that really all leads up to us going to stage one. So we have a debate in the chamber on the bill, and at that point, the parliamentarians are asked to vote on the principles behind the bill. So not the detail, just the sort of underpinning principles, whether they agree with that or not. If they do, and we're hoping that they will, we would then go to stage two, and that's when we see amendments being made, so different tweaks made to the bill to make it a better bill. And then all going well, we would get to stage three, where it would have a final vote and eventually receive royal assent, when it would become an act. So it would move from a bill to an act, and that's when it's essentially a law.
Thanks, Amanda. That's really helpful. And Liam, did you have anything to add to that? I think Amanda's explained it really well.
Yeah, I think Amanda's covered it. I think very comprehensively there. The only thing probably to just expand upon is the element around the three-stage process in Parliament. As Amanda says, the stage one debate and vote based on a report that will be prepared by the lead committee. That is simply a vote on the general principles, and unfortunately this is where previous bills have fallen down, that we haven't been able to garner majority support in favour of the general principles. And what that's prevented us from doing is moving into stage two and stage three, which are the amending stages of the scrutiny process, where you can start to tease out, well, if not this, then what will command a kind of majority support? How do we express this in legal language that gives people confidence that there are sufficient safeguards, that there is sufficient transparency, that in a sense this is a law that could be made to work safely and successfully. And having been denied that opportunity in the last couple of occasions, this. And very much hope it will be the case. This will be the first time that we get to that stage. I'm maybe running ahead of myself, but the importance of getting into the detail of how you actually frame the law cannot be, I think, underplayed. And the general principles, accepting that the law must change, is in some senses the easy bit. The difficult bit will be about tying this down in black letter law in ways that ensure that we don't have unintended consequences, that what the law does is what we expected and want it to achieve. And that's going to be such a critical part of this process. And it will be the first time we've gone through that process in relation to legislation of this type.
Thank you both. That's really helpful. So this question is for both of you, and I think it would be remiss of me not to mention the opposition to the bill. And an argument against assisted dying is that a law that allowed for it would potentially leave vulnerable people unprotected. So this is something maybe you could shed light on. How would such a law actually help protect vulnerable people? Amanda, do you want to come in first?
Sure. So I think that we need to sort of take it right back. So you've mentioned that there's opposition to this. And of course, since Liam announced his intention to bring a bill, we've seen huge amounts of dialogue and sort of public discourse around this, where people do have concerns about it. But there isn't actually any proposal there at the moment. We don't have any bill drafted. So again, as Liam said, it's really important that people focus on the facts of what's actually being proposed. And following on from that, I think, what is the reason for law? Why do we legislate? And one of the reasons for having laws is as a protective measure. Now, there's a whole other host of reasons why we make laws, but they should be certain things. So they should be, accessible. They should be published. They should be clear. They shouldn't be contradictory. And that's the situation that we have at the moment, because in Scotland, we don't have any legislation on assisted dying. We don't have any guidelines from the prosecutor, and we have very little case law. So, not infrequently, I have solicitors and advocates coming to me asking for advice when they're faced with clients who maybe do want to go to Dignitas and travel abroad, or they are arranging their wills and they get into conversations about ending their own life. And there just isn't anything there. There's no published law, there's no statute, there's no guidelines for people, citizens and practitioners and legislators to go and look at and assess, how can I manage my conduct to make sure that I am complying with the law. So I think that's important there, that at present we don't have any framework for people to work from. And that is a real failing in Scots law, and that we don't have that there is that vacuum there that has to be filled. And on that, we know that there are people who are going to Dignitas. We know that there are increasing numbers of people across the UK who are ending their own life at home. And there are people who are assisted to die by very well-meaning and compassionate doctors. So I think that the law for us is to give people the choice and the reassurance of securing a dignified death, but it's also a protective measure because there's nothing in place at the moment. There isn't any capacity assessment to make sure that these decisions are being made by people who, of their own free will. I'm not sure how much more you want me to go into there, but for me, that's sort of the crux of it, is that we give people this choice, but it also acts as a protective measure for things that are already
happening. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Amanda. Liam, do you want to expand on that at
all? I think again Amanda's covered the territory very well. I mean, for me, the most effective way of providing protection in any area of the law is to shine a light on it. It's to be clear, it's to be non-contradictory, but it's to be transparent. And I think at the moment there is such a grey area, whether it's about the withdrawal of treatment, the refusal of treatment, individuals being forced into a situation where they and or their family members, or with the aid of the family members, take things into their own hands, often in ways that are even more traumatic than the terminal diagnosis of the illness that they're suffering from. I absolutely understand the issues around vulnerability, but those are there now. And let's make no mistake about it, those are absolutely there now. And I think we're doing a disservice to those that do feel vulnerable, not being transparent and open about the choices that are available. And I think there's a bit of a cultural thing in this as well, a bit of a reticence about being open and talking openly and candidly about death and what death means. It's not unique to our culture, but if you look around the world, there are cultures who, in a sense, are far more. They use death as a celebration of life rather than an ending. Now, I make that point only because I think the best way in order to assist those who are coming to the end of their life to come to terms with that is to be open, to encourage those discussions to take place, to take place within families, amongst friends, with the medical practitioners. And I think that, in a sense, we can also help promote and stimulate through this debate about changing the law. I think we need to do it for very practical reasons in terms of bringing that transparency, that with it come protections. But I think it opens up a far more honest discussion about what death means for each individual, because it will vary. And I think that can be a positive benefit from this process as well.
Thanks, Liam. I think that's a really important point, that we want to open the discussion about death in general, not just assisted dying. Amanda, I want to come back to you. So you've studied legal philosophy as a doctoral candidate. Would you like to send a message to the audience, to those that are either hopeful for future legislation and perhaps to those who are fearful or in opposition?
I suppose I would just say engage with the consultation that's forthcoming and really read it in detail. I'll be honest, it is a long consultation, but it has to be. We really had to leave no stone unturned. So I would say, engage with the consultation, read it, come to us if you have any questions, respond to the consultation, let us know what your concerns are if you have them, and let us know what you would like to see in the bill, because again, it's not drafted at this point in time. So really just engage with that process, because it is a very genuine consultation, something that's changed since the last two attempts, alongside the other things that Liam's mentioned, is that we've got a lot more data, a lot more empirical data and anecdotal data that shows us, how it can work in practice. Before, we only had quite a few jurisdictions: Oregon in the United States, the Netherlands, Belgium. Now, there are over 200 million people worldwide who now have access to some form of assisted dying. And in those jurisdictions, it's part of their laws that they must publish and record and monitor, the rates of assisted dying, the reasons that people choose assisted dying. So we now have all of these reports and all of this data for 20 plus years that we can draw upon. There's also Scotland-specific research from my studies that you've mentioned that shows us exactly what is happening in Scotland and tells us, what the law is in Scotland, because it is a bit of a clinical, legal, and ethical fudge at the moment. So yeah, I would just say, come to it with an open mind, regardless of your position. If everyone could do what the BME did yesterday and move to a position of neutrality before they read this consultation, then that would be my main hope.
Thank you. And Liam, as an MSP, what's your message to those that can hear us, to those that are hopeful, but also those that are concerned about a bill?
I could do no better than echo what Amanda's just said. I mean, engage with the consultation, consider the detail. There's a lot in there, but the fundamentals are fairly clear. There'll be aspects of it that are perhaps of less interest, less concern to both supporters and opponents. You don't feel the need to respond to all of the questions. There may be other questions that you feel need to be asked, or concerns that need to be raised. That's entirely legitimate too. This process is quite a protracted process, but it's a protracted process for a reason. It allows ample opportunity for people to feed in their views. We don't have a revising chamber, we only have a unicameral parliament, so we need to get it right, essentially first time round. So I think all I can do, whether you're for it, you're against it, you come to it with mixed views, you're torn, whatever your backstory, come to it, I think, with as much of an open mind as possible, but feel free to submit whatever comments you feel are relevant to you. And this process, I would hope, will be able to respond to that. It won't necessarily give those the answers that they want. And I think it would be fair to say that I believe this is a law whose time has come. It's long overdue, and it's the right law at the right time. So that's the kind of momentum behind this. But it's a law that needs to take on board the concerns and the aspirations of as many people as possible. And I would hope that the consultation will allow that to begin to happen. And then through the scrutiny process by Parliament thereafter, there'll be further opportunities to engage. But one of the great strengths of the Scottish Parliament is its openness and accessibility. And on issues like that, that's going to be absolutely fundamentally important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just caveat that, submit your views within reason, because it takes a certain level of resilience to read through all of these, not just from people who are opposed, but the personal stories that are shared as well, because they are really harrowing. But that's what we want to hear, and these are the things that are going to let us build the best bill that we possibly can, and that's our aim.
I think this needs to be done in a spirit of respect. I mean, I absolutely understand there are polarised views on this issue. I am committed to trying to do my best to make sure that I chart a course through this that doesn't seem to kind of amplify those divisions. And therefore, I think whatever your views, they are very welcome. But I would urge everybody to engage in this process candidly, but with respect for all involved.
Well, thank you both very much. That's the end of my questions. You'll be glad to hear. Do either of you have any last points that you want to make before we finish up?
Don't think you've got any more tape in the reel, have you? I think we've covered it off pretty comprehensively.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think probably the only thing I can say is that, as Amanda says, since Margot took up the cudgels all those years ago, and before her, my former colleague Jeremy Purvis, who had a shot at it as well, we've come a long way. The support structure around this is far greater, and the support I've had from Amanda, from yourself, Sorcha, from other campaigning organisations and individuals, members of the public. I cannot say enough heartfelt thanks for that, because it's absolutely essential in terms of taking forward a member's bill. I mean, it's a great strength of the Scottish Parliament, but nobody should underestimate the amount of work that is involved in trying to do that.
Yeah, well, it's good to work with you too, Liam. I think the only party I've not worked with now is Labour. So I think I've worked my way around them all, apart from Labour. But it's good to have, it's good to be surrounded by good people and people who are supportive. And when you do look back to I've spoke to Jeremy. I know Jeremy's a patron of Friends at the End. I've spoke to him in detail about, just how tricky it was for him to get his off the ground. There just wasn't the support there. We've come an awful long way. So it's good to be surrounded by good people trying to do good things.
I think the hope would be that you wouldn't find yourself having to be taking this forward with a Labour member of the Scottish Parliament. Let's see if we can't get this done and dusted this time round. But I think the point you make, that the cross-party support that's there now, and quite apart from the campaign organisations, but some colleagues across the parties for whom I have enormous respect, have huge political differences on many issues, but on this issue there has just been rock solid support building over a number of years, and I think the point at which going anywhere near this issue was seen as the kind of third rail for anybody's political career is long gone, and back to where you came in, Sorcha, about some of the kind of public support and the mismatch there's been between the political debate and where the public sat on this. That's moved on dramatically to a point where people who may actually have been quite intuitively supportive of this now have the confidence to be supportive. This is an issue on which people want to see a change in the law, and it's of significant importance enough that it may determine their voting intentions, but they'll certainly make clear their support in ways that was perhaps not the case a decade or so ago. So we've come a long way, and that cross-party support, as well as the support we get from the campaign organisations and individuals in different spheres, is absolutely invaluable. Absolutely invaluable.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. I know you're both very busy, and yeah, I think we'll just finish up there. But that's us finished. Thank you guys so much. That was a really interesting discussion.
But, no, thanks for the invitation and for putting this all together. Okay.
All right. Bye everyone.
Bye.
See you later.